it occurred to me that in life, a lot of it is what stories people tell about you. And, what story do I want people telling about me 50 years, 56 years from now? And that's one of the motivators I think I have with the kids. I've been teaching kids for 23 years, and I have never charged a junior player a penny for instruction.
Rory Pastor has trained national champions, built online programs reaching kids on 4 continents, and he's never charged a junior player a dime. Today, he's sharing why 30 minutes of practice beats 3 hours, why your bad habits never actually go away, and the biggest mistake he sees players make when they're trying to improve, on this episode of Cue the Experts. Welcome to Cue the Experts, the pool improvement podcast where we dive deep into the minds of players and instructors who have dedicated themselves to mastering the sport. I'm Jeremiah Gage.
I'm Digital Dave.
And today we're joined by Rory Pastor in Massachusetts. Rory has been teaching pool since 1999, starting with the junior training programs and eventually earning PBIA Master Instructor status and the 2020 PBIA Instructor of the Year award. He runs the Red Dragons Billiard Club and Training Center in Harvard, Massachusetts, operates 2 major pool leagues covering New England, and serves as lead instructor for the BCA WPA Break and Run Junior Instructional Program. He's also on the board of directors for the Billiard Education Foundation, runs the American Online Pool School offering PBIA accreditation online. He's a CSI certified referee and somehow still practices law full time.
Wow.
About 10 months ago, his daughters told him he was too old to learn YouTube. So naturally, he started a YouTube channel called All Things Pool New England and proved them wrong. Thanks for joining us today, Rory.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great motivator to have your daughters tell you you're too old to do something.
Yeah, there's nothing like a little oomph from family. So, Rory, you had sent me a couple of pictures when you were really young with, it looks like some other champions, or you said you had some memorable stories to tell us about this. So,
I mean, the best way to tell about memorable moments is how long I've been telling the stories, okay? So the picture, I don't know if you have it, could bring it up. There's a picture of myself and Willie Moscone when I think I was 12 years old in this picture. It was 1969. The story behind this picture was I started playing pool when I was 9 years old because my parents, I grew up in Queens, New York. My parents were so afraid in the 1960s that I would go outside and I would get in trouble. There'd be drugs or there'd be some trouble out there. So they had the notion that if they put a pool table in the basement, get rid of the lolly columns and put a pool table in the basement, then I would invite my friends over and they would keep an eye on me. I'd be home. So it kind of worked. I mean, it was a good idea. And I started, but nobody knew how to play pool. My father didn't play pool, no one in my family. So my father had purchased a little book at a used bookstore, Willie Moscone on, and I looked at the pictures and it was, and Willie became my hero. And so when I was 12 years old, fast forward 2-3 years, Mosconi was doing an exhibition tournament and Golden Cue Billiards on Queens Boulevard in New York.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it was old Golden Cue. And I'm not even sure that we had a car at the time. I remember that my dad and I took the bus and I wore my best clothes, and that's what you see in the picture. And we went to see Willie Moscone, and I still remember that. And that's when the best way I can define a memorable moment. I remember that because he played a local, I guess the house pro there. And the house pro ran straight pool, of course, and ran 24, 25 balls. And Moscone got up and 60 in the mid 60s without too much effort. And I was very excited. He was my hero. And so my dad, he was also selling another book at that time, a little red book he was selling. And my dad asked him, so Mr. Mosconi, could you take a picture with my son? And again, we didn't have any much money at all, and I think the book was $1.25, and I don't think my dad had the $1.25. He says, "Well, are you going to buy my book?" And my dad said, "Well, no, no." And Mosconi then said, "Well, I'll tell you what. He can stand next to me for the picture, but I won't look at him during the picture." And take a moment to think about that. So the picture that you have of me and Mosconi, he was giving an interview to a reporter and he waved me over, and he made a point of not looking at me when I was standing next to him for the picture. And that was 56 years ago or more. And I've been my dad's 91 now. And if I say, "Dad, remember that day?" He says, "Yeah, that guy Mosconi was a real jerk." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, Dad, he was. But also, I sent you pictures of two other guys at the same event, Cue Ball Kelly and Kid Laurie, right? Both, I know Oneferia Laurie is I think he's in the Hall of Fame, and referee Cue Ball Kelly might be as well. So they saw what happened, and they came up, I'm sure that I was more than disappointed at the time. And they came over and they talked to my dad and myself. They talked to us and they said, we're sorry, Willie can be funny. And they spent at least a half hour with me, showing me trick shots, taking the time to encourage me. And that whole sequence of events really spoke a lot to me because, and I have a picture of Willie Moscone in my office with a signed cue ball, and I bought that book. And in my law office, I keep that picture. And people think that, "Roy, why? That's you. He must be your hero." I said, "No." I said, "That picture's in my office to remind me not to be a jerk to somebody."
That's good.
Every day I look at that picture because it wouldn't have cost him anything just to put his arm around me and say, "Good luck, best of luck in the sport," and give some words of encouragement. And it occurred to me that in life, a lot of it is what stories people tell about you. And, what story do I want people telling about me 50 years, 56 years from now? And that, that's one of the motivators I think I have with the kids, I've been teaching kids for 23 years, and I have never charged a junior player a penny for instruction. I don't mind charging adults, but I've never charged a junior because I don't want it to be about money. I want everybody to have an opportunity to do their best and reach their potential.
Well, Roy, it says a lot about you for not, for understanding he wasn't going to look at you, and then you not stomping on his foot to make him look at you.
Well, at the time, I didn't know what to do. He was still my hero. I was still in awe of him standing next to him, but I was only 12 years old, so I didn't have. Now I might stamp on his foot a little bit now. But back then, I didn't have the wherewithal to do that. But to have, the other guys that were there, and I had no clue who Cue Ball Kelly or Kid Laurie. I had no idea who these people were. All I knew is that they came over and they took the time to make an effort, and they made impression. I'm not sure how I would have come away from that event if they had not done that. But they took the time, and it was overall it was a positive event. I tried to take away something positive, even learn something even from Mosconi at that point. And there was a second memorable moment because I told you I had at least two. I mean, I've had a lot of junior players who have won pro events, national, international tournaments. I've had lots of national champions. But that's not really how I see what defines a successful player or success in the sport. I had a junior player about 10, 12 years ago that his father dropped him off when he was 14 years old, and he had all kinds of challenges on every level. Physical, he had lots of things going on. But he came in with such a great attitude. So he came in, he would help with the younger kids. He came in and did the work. Okay. He worked hard and he did everything he could to become the best player that he could and help everybody else in my group become the best player that they could. So I took him to the junior nationals for 2-3 years. And he was so excited. I don't think he'd ever been on a team sport before. You know, we all had team shirts on. It was very exciting. And I remember being at the nationals, and generally my kids do really well, and this was really the defining moment, and memorable for me, is he won a rack. In the tournament, he won one rack. And when he won the rack, his opponent stood up and started to applaud, and everyone in the audience stood up and applauded that victory. And to him, it was like winning the biggest tournament in the world. It was a great measure of success. And in my mind, that's what I look at these programs. I look at these programs is not even about pool. It's helping players and people become the best that they can be. And if I can do that, then pool is just, the success, all these other national championship events that my kids have won, that's just a byproduct. They go to top schools. I have kids now that are, engineers, and they're going to medical school, and they're doing all kinds of things, and they've achieved and success in pool. But it's not just the focus of pool. It's got to be the ability to help these people reach their potential, whatever that's going to be. And I think this is a great vehicle to accomplish that.
Before we continue, if you're serious about improving your game, I built an app where you can track your practice and see your progress over time. It's called Bullseye Billiards, and you can download it for free on iOS or Android. All right, back to the show. Yeah, pool as the avenue or the foundation for and more life learnings and teaching.
Absolutely, and I don't turn anybody away. So again, I have students with a lot of challenges. I have students with I had one kid one year. I have students with physical disabilities. I had one kid one year with he was not very high functioning on the spectrum, so he had to have a caretaker stand next to him when he was shooting at all times. So you had to have an adult with him at all times. And he would play. I would have him in a friendly competition, and he would just say done, and he would walk away in the middle of a shot. Some of the other kids would say, Mr. Pastor, he's good. I said, well, he's done. That was his best game for you. He gave you his best game, and he was done. So we want to take it's all the little steps.
Roy, what was the spark that took this vehicle and put it in motion to use pool and build junior programs? What was the spark that led you to start to want to do that?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is I played a lot growing up, and I played, typically, like most of us, I played at home starting, my family and friends. I joined a boys club in New York, and I played for years at the boys club. And then when I went to college, I played at the ACUI. I played the collegiate level, and I did that for a number of years. Did pretty well with on that level. And then I went to law school, and I got married, and life hit me, right? So I literally did not play for 20 years. Didn't have a pool cue in my hand for 20 years. And one rainy day, it just got into me, and I said, honey, I have to go try to play. I heard the rumor that there was a tournament down the street. I went into the attic, and I found one of my old pool cues, and I went down there, and I think I came in second in the tournament. And then I got the bug again, right?
Right, that'll do it.
But like many of us, my memory of how good I was did not coincide with my skill level at that point. So, I was good enough to play in a local little bar tournament, and always place or do really well, but that was not how I remembered from 20 years early. And all notions of playing at a much higher level escaped me. So I focused my energies on teaching and running junior programs. And I always, maybe in a way, I give credit to Mosconi for snubbing me back then, because I swore that I would never I would make it available to any kids, and I would make it available, and money wouldn't be an issue. We would just go forward. So, I don't know, but I think my memory of my skill level compared to my memory of how I played 20 years earlier convinced me that my focus, I'd be better off trying to teach.
Did you, during this journey of teaching kids, have the kind of the reverse of your Mosconi experience, where you had pro players or whatever that the kids got to watch and be introduced to, and you could relive that on a different level, and these kids hopefully wouldn't get snubbed by whoever they were trying to talk to?
Well, I have to be honest with you. Most of the kids I teach have no clue who the pro players are. They don't, I could, I've had in this club, I've brought in, I had Bustamante here last year. I had, I've had Efren Reyes here. I've brought in some of the pro players for events, and usually it's a fundraiser for the juniors. So I've had a number of and I always have to explain to the kids who these people are. They just don't know. They're a lot of fun, and they have a good time with them. And we had a great time with Bustamante last year here. I brought all the kids in, and I did a podcast, the Boosty, and part of the podcast was I had the kids ask them questions and working with the kids. So it was a blast. But really, this really isn't about that. So that I don't have, the pro level players really don't have. I've done a lot of work here with Mike DeShane. I certified Mike DeShane as an instructor year and a half ago, and I've had Mike here teaching classes with me. So they've had plenty of exposure to pro players, but it's not really been a focus.
Yeah, it's great what you're doing with the juniors and everything. That's interesting that, Mosconi still had that type of side effect on you, even years later.
Well, I when I did this, I had taught classes on the college level. And so I think how I first experimented with this back in the late 90s, my daughters were still in high school, and I said, maybe some of these kids want to learn how to play pool, right? And there was a bowling alley with a few pool tables. I put up a sign, had some kids come down, and then I started I had an 8-year-old kid who got very good very quickly, okay? And then I had some teaching background, I said, for on the college level, and I quickly realized that I didn't really have this proper structure to coach and teach pool to keep up with this kid who was getting really good. This kid who now still plays pool with me, that was over 20 years ago. He and Billy Thorpe, I think, in one or 2 years, were two of the best junior players going through the junior program some time ago. But he ended up going to Brandeis and getting a business degree and going into banking. But he still plays pool with me. But I knew that there was a structure. So that's how I found the PBIA program. And that was like 2003, 2004. And I just to kind of develop a structure for teaching this in a much more effective way.
Yeah, that's great. You found the PBIA, and for those watching that don't know what that is, it's the Professional Billiards Instructor Association through the
back then
Congress
it was
of
the
America.
BCA Instructors Program. It's
BCA Billiard.
But it's the same program now. It's the PBIA. It's a terrific program, and I studied with Dave McNeil and Walter Sienkiewicz. I've studied with other instructors as well as I've gone up to the master level. I still remember my first lesson with Dave McNeil was one of the when I'm training an instructor now, it's still one of the most difficult things to teach somebody. And that first lesson was the entire weekend. It was 2-3 days and I think I was in Connecticut in this class. David walked around with a coffee cup in his hand. I never saw him touch a pool cue. Not once. He walked around, and I'm looking at him, and he's challenging me, and he's pushing me, and which is great. And at one point, I said, David, can you do this? And he said, Roy, I'm not going to tell you if I can do it or not, because it doesn't matter. You're paying me money so I can teach you how to do it and how to teach it. and it has nothing to do with me. It's you're paying me to be able to teach and coach you. And I had to think about that for a while, and that's still one of the hardest lessons for new instructors to grasp, because in the old days, I mean, at least in my generation, you didn't have things like instructors and coaches. You went down and maybe if you were lucky, some guy would let you rack form, and you try to pick up a few little tidbits and play with them, but you didn't really have a formal structure coaching program. And I think that is something that's great right now, because now we're catching up to what the Europeans are doing, what they're doing in China and Russia and Poland. We're catching up, and part of the PBIA, part of our instructors program is really, fueling that, because we're helping these people develop a, a, a structured curriculum, a way to teach, a way to learn, that we've been way behind. This country's been way behind our European counterparts and Asian counterparts. And I think, but now we're catching up. I think it's a lot of good things ahead.
Yeah, and with accredited academies, structured is where it takes, having standards and a curriculum to really study the sport and learn it. Yeah, it's there's not really too many secrets out there anymore these days with YouTube.
Well, that's exactly right. This is pool that's part of the issue, that when people go on the internet, right? Now, let's face it, there's some really good stuff on the internet, right? There's some great stuff on YouTube, and then there's really horrible stuff in the same breath. And the problem is people don't know what they don't know. So how do you tell the difference? I mean, if it's nice if you have a coach and you have a mentor, you have somebody who's trained in it, can kind of steer you in the right direction and help you build your skills in a sensible way, block by block. But otherwise, you're just floundering on that, and you're picking up bad habits along with good habits, and you're not making the progress that you should be making. But, there's a lot of stuff out there, good and bad.
Roy, any changes that you've made to how the PBIA, takes and changes or takes and educates? Is it a challenge to be, maybe there's less need for on the felt versus pen and paper and study, or has that teeter-totter or balance changed at all over the years?
I'm not sure that it's changed. I think that there are more opportunities to learn the fundamentals and learn the reason why we do some of these things. I mean, look at, I have in my front room, I have a library, and I have for my members. This is a members only club. So I have members come in, they can borrow books. And Jeremiah, I think one of your books is out there too. I have some books out there in my library, and people borrow it. But if you look at some of the older, look at things like some of the Mosconi's older materials. Basically, a lot of these generation, they show you what they do, right? Not really best practice. They'll show you and say, I do this, and I'm a good player. And there's still a lot of instructors that do that. It makes me crazy. But there's still a lot of instructors in this area and all around the country that's they have a very myopic view. It's very tunnel vision. They just look at what they do. They look in the mirror. They say, I do this, and I'm a good player. Therefore, this is how you should do it, without an understanding of why or what is best to accommodate the physical attributes of the student, the skill level of the student. So I think nowadays we have a much broader understanding of things. We have a lot more access to materials and a lot more access to an understanding of how to teach those materials. And really and I look at it as building blocks. We're doing it step by step, because if you come to my academy and and Jeremiah, I'm sure you guys get the same thing. Mr. Pastor Roy, I want to learn. I want to do the 3 and 4 and 5 rail diamond systems, the mathematical systems. I said, really? I said, you can't shoot a pool cue in a straight line. You can't hit a ball in a straight line. So I'm not going to teach you that, because you're going to be unsuccessful. And then you're going to blame me, saying I'm a bad teacher. We're going to build the skill sets that you need to be successful in those skills and those techniques, and then you'll understand why, and then you'll have some level of success, and then we can both be happy. But it's we all get that all the time, and especially with adults who have the kids are a lot more open. I'm going to tell you something. The kids are easier to teach than the adults, because the adults come to us with all these years of bad habits and preconceived notions. I have a chart in my main room when people come in. I walk my adult students over to it. It's a Dunning-Kruger bell curve. You must be familiar.
Yes. Yeah.
Dunning-Kruger. So it is when the least competent have the highest level of confidence, and because they don't know what they don't know.
That's
And
right.
then as they learn, their level of confidence goes down, because then they start to realize that they may not know everything. And then as they learn a little more and gain a little more confidence, it goes up a little bit more, never quite as high as when they knew nothing and they thought they knew everything. So that's the big issue with a lot of the adults, and you have to walk them through that, and you have to get them on board and have them realize that they have to be on the same page, and they have to kind of embrace their position on that bell curve, that maybe they might have something to learn.
There's only one pane in Johari's window that has growth, and that's it. And that's where those that don't know, they know that they don't know, and that's the only place to grow.
That's right. But you got to help. Sometimes you have to help them get there. I won't teach a student, an adult student. I won't teach. The kids are easy. They're blank slate. It's easy to give them good fundamentals right up front. For the adults, I won't take a new student on until I put them on videotape and we go through, and then we watch the videotape together, and we start breaking the little movements down piece by piece, because I'm a big believer in having a movement-based program, the small movements, and not skill sets, and working on skill sets, and not so much a drill-based program.
And you do a lot of online instruction as well.
Yes, it's when I was with the junior American team in China back in, I don't remember, in the 2017 or something. And one of the boys, and I spent a lot of time with one of the families, Makil Paris, who ended up winning the 16 World Championships I think we were in Russia the next year. But we were in China together, and I remember talking, they're from the Virgin Islands, and I remember talking to his mother. Said, Mr. Pastor, we don't have anybody like you near us. We don't have a coach available to us. We don't have anybody. And, I thought about that for quite a bit. And within a short time thereafter, I got a call from Master Instructor Walter Sienkiewicz, who I did a lot of teaching with. And Walter was on the PBIA instructor committee, and the BCA had approached the instructors and said, we'd like to do something for the community to help grow the sport. What can we do? And Walter called me for ideas. He said, I don't know what to do. I said, oh my gosh, that's the easiest thing in the world, right? In 3 minutes, I sent him an outline for the break and run program. I said, what we should do is, none of the BCA and now the PBIA instructors, we don't work with the kids. I mean, I do, but as a general rule, when we did these tournaments overseas, the Americans will always send a pro player who may or may not know anything about working with kids, by the way, right? And we'd send a pro player who may not be equipped to really act in that capacity. But the Europeans, the Asians, everybody else, they had professional coaches. Their coaches were the professional instructors. They were our counterparts in those countries. And I said, why is it that when we go to the junior nationals and our trade show event that are run together, why is it that all the kids are down here in one room, all the instructors are in the other room, and they never cross? I can't get the instructors to walk from the instructor's room where they're patting each other on the back, no offense, to go over and talk to the kids. And so it made me nuts. So when Walter called me, I said, look, this is what we're going to do. Why don't we set up an online program so kids like Maciel in Virgin Islands or somewhere else, that they have access to a PBIA instructor, one-on-one. We'll do this, and I insisted, which caused problems, I insisted that it'd be no charge, right? Because we should be able to, as instructors, we should be helping to grow this sport and to reach out to the kids who need it. And so it would be really focused on kids who do not have access to instructors or do not have the resources to hire instructors. So the BCA took that and said, wow, this is exactly what we were looking for. And by the way, Roy, you're in charge of a program, which is really how things work, right? So now I found myself in charge of the Break and Run program, which are designed to be primarily online, but we have a mix. I have kids now that I teach online that come see me for the weekend, that we do a mix of it. It is basically really focused on tying in a trained instructor and somebody who's background certified. So all of our instructors have to go through a background check. So all of our instructors are trained to work with kids and who are experienced, and then they work with they're assigned to mentor a kid. Now, in my mind, this was a no-brainer. I thought, my God, Roy, you had a brilliant idea. Everybody's going to love to do this. It was a little more painful than I thought it was going to be. Because, first of all, I didn't realize that, a lot of the instructors were still using flip phones. So they just were not comfortable with going online and doing this. Now, I have to backtrack a little bit. One of the reasons I knew this was a good idea, it was about 12, 13 years ago. I got a message when I first started, actually around 2005, 2006, maybe closer to 20 years ago. I got a email from a boy in China, 10-year-old boy in China. He was in the Beijing school. Now, in the schools in China, these kids live there. They're sports academies, and they train 8 to 10 hours a day with professional coaches, and it's a big deal. And this boy would say, he asked me, are you an American coach? I said, yes, I just got my PB. I'm a, entry. I just got this. Yes. And he said, well, would you look at my homework? Because what he did was, during the week, they would practice. They would create videos. Then they would study the videos on the weekends and prepare for the next week. So for a year and a half maybe, this boy sent me his homework every year. So I got to see what they were doing in this training program in the Beijing school in China.
Wow, that's huge.
And then I would give my critique, and we would communicate by email. So I had a sense a long time ago that this could be an effective thing to do. So when this opportunity came up, I said, let's do that. We could use Facebook, we could use WhatsApp, we could use all these tools out there to communicate with kids, make it private settings so no one can see this. We can exchange videos, we can exchange live feeds. We have Zoom, we have all these tools now that we could do, but it didn't quite get the excited reception with the instructors that I thought. Some of them were uncomfortable with technology. Some didn't like the idea that it was free. There was going to be a free service for the kids, and I got a lot of kickback. So for the first year and a half, it was only me teaching because I couldn't get anybody else, any of the other instructors to sign on. Then COVID hit. And all of a sudden, I looked like I was a genius, right? That I have this online training program, like I knew COVID was coming. So, a couple of billiard magazines did articles, and then I had this online training program. The BCA got a lot of good press out of it, PB, only because now we were offering something online that was not shut down by COVID. And then when that happened, as soon as COVID hit, I started the online school to accredit instructors. So now I've accredited instructors in Australia, in Canada, in Africa, all around the world. And it doesn't really matter with this online program where people are. So people can sign up. Then my next step with the online program, the break and run program, is now I had new instructors. So didn't get the experienced instructors to come on. So my initial idea of just matching them up didn't really work. I had very enthusiastic instructors without any experience. So then I took my curriculum that I've been working with my kids for 20-something years, and I made canned lessons. So now I set up a curriculum and a syllabus with canned lessons that the instructors can come on and with the same pace, and then a new instructor would work with an experienced instructor, and then we go through the curriculum and syllabus. And it takes a lot of the students have taken between 1.5 to 2 years to get through the entire break and run program, and a lot of kids are still continuing. So we've had a lot of national champions. We had one American student, I think it was Sophia Mast. Sophia Mast came through our break and run program. That's where she got a lot of her fundamentals, and she came very good. We had 2 kids from America, 2 kids from South America were at the Worlds, 2 kids from South Africa were at the Worlds, and Tanvi Valam was one of my students from online in person representing India. So we had kids from 4 different countries at the Worlds that have come through working through our break and run online program. So the results are actually more than I had hoped for.
So I've been playing with Talum chalk for a while now, and I can honestly say it is the best chalk that I've ever used. And all of their pieces nowadays have this QR code on them, so you can verify the authenticity of every piece. All right, now back to the show. With all of your knowledge and your teaching throughout your whole career, do you have any like uncommon knowledge that you're willing to share with us and our audience?
So I don't know if it's uncommon knowledge. I think it's unappreciated knowledge, which is simply that there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. There's no secrets to this stuff. Like any sport, and you have to look at it as like any sport, that there are good fundamentals. There is timing. There's a timing and a rhythm to learning as well as to playing. You can't jump the gun. You can't put something ahead where it doesn't belong in the learning process, because then you give up something that's required for success. So I think it's simply a matter of understanding that there are no real secrets. And unfortunately, when you're looking at YouTube and you look in the internet, everybody tells you they have a secret, right? Everybody's got a magic tip. They've gotten a magic cue. They have a magic aiming system. They have a magic, and if you do this, you're never going to miss again. And they have, a lot of sales, and most of that is at the very least a distraction, and it really is not very, very helpful. Listen, I have lasers and I have things that are fun to take out, but I take them out very sparsely, because they're not really, they're just to use as a tool, but they're not in and of themselves learning techniques. You really have to focus, and you have to take the time, and you have to have the right mental attitude. But I wish there was a secret. Then I wouldn't have had that epiphany when I came back after 20 years. I would have just picked up the secret out of my bag.
With all the kids that like the 8-year-old you talked about that, advanced very quickly, that like any pool player, we all have ebb and flow to the game where we can peak and valley. And, I'm sure that there was, some piece of advice you could give now to youth that are trying to manage that and that versus an adult who might have played for 20 years. How does that relate to each other?
Well,
in your
the advice I give to the kids is the same advice I give to the adults. All right, you want to try to help them develop a growth mindset. You want to have them be able to appreciate, because you can, with an open mind, you can learn from both your wins and your losses. And I tell everybody, everyone. If I have a room full of new adults, if I'm teaching, I just taught a group of 25 people a week or two ago, just these league players. I invited them in, and I gave 6 hours worth of clinics. And I said, who here has had that ESPN magic moment? And you made this great shot, and if only the cameras were around, you'd be on TV. It was such a great shot. And the bottom line is everybody says they have that. Everyone has those moments of flashes of glory, but they're generally connected by long chains of mediocrity. So it's really how do we break up the links in that chain to start increasing the level of good shots and increasing our skill sets. But everybody has that. And if they appreciate that and they can accept it for what it is, they'll be better off. Everybody be better at any skill level, be better off.
Technique is so huge. And learning all the skills, it takes a lot of time. What, in your opinion, have you seen is like the most common mistake or errors that players make when they're trying to improve?
That's a good question. I think the biggest mistake is trying to do too much at one time, okay, and not being able to break down the little pieces. You have players, and again, they'll go and they'll watch a pro player, or they'll watch a video, and then all of a sudden they're trying to do everything at one time. And when you do that, you learn nothing, right? Because you're not breaking. You may need work on your stance or your grip or just some very basic. But if you're trying to do everything at once, and that's what a lot of the amateur players will do, they don't know how to focus on one thing at a time. That's what happens. Then you're not learning anything. All you're going to end up doing, or they're practicing too long, is all you end up doing is losing focus. You get tired, and you start reinforcing all your bad habits again.
Do you think that fundamentals and technique is more important than decision making?
I think when you have good fundamentals and good technique, you make better decisions.
Well,
so,
yeah,
I mean, I don't think you can really separate the two.
That's on the inside cover, even off the front too, on your next book. I mean, come on, you can't say it more.
Well, no, I
plainly
mean,
than that.
seriously, you have people making great decisions, but they can't execute.
Right.
The results are unsatisfactory. Then you have people making bad decisions, but they might got lucky because their technique is, they're pulling something off, but that only goes so far. So I really don't think that you could really separate the two. I don't think in other words, I don't think that you should pick one over the other. It's a matter of keeping the decisions within the realm of your skill set and then taking that along with skills as you develop them. So I have some of my more advanced kids. We do a straight pool program. We have a side online program where I have kids. We talk about techniques for building up, and we have 7 levels of challenges when, everything's from breaking 1 rack to 2 racks to 3 racks to, who's going to get the 40 balls run first. And then we will work on drills and techniques. How are we going to look for the key ball? How are we going to develop our insurance ball? How are we going to reevaluate the table after each shot to find those things? And we'll have breakout drills to break out those skills. And as they improve their skills, then we can challenge them to make new and different and better decisions when we increase the challenges for the runs. I mean, that's just an example. We could do the same thing in really any format. But I think that you have to have a decision set that is tied in to skill sets at different levels. And then you have to kind of work your student so that they're able to get there. You just can't give them something that is, you have to let them build success at certain levels, and then as they improve, everything else will improve too, including the decisions.
Well, do you think that, decision making can be made watching pool, but technique can only be made playing pool?
I think a lot can be learned watching pool, but how you incorporate those skills into your hands and your mindset, that requires time at the table. Additionally, it's the mental aspect of it. I know, Jeremiah, you and I have talked about this, before. I mean, I think there's a rhythm, not just to learning, but there's a rhythm and cadence to playing.
Yeah.
You know, you have to about 8-10 years ago, I brought in for my junior program players were really starting to excel at the national level. I brought in a yoga instructor, and I paid a yoga instructor to come in, and we did meditations. And I know this is something that is not shocking to anybody. We did 5-minute meditations for the 5-minute break during the tournament. We did 1-minute meditation. We did, and we still do that. And we'll do deep breathing techniques. We'll tie deep breathing into stroke mechanics. So if we have, for instance, in a stroke mechanic, when you're picking a trigger to go from your planning stage to your execution stage, I will often ask, especially if I have somebody, adults and juniors, adults as well, somebody who's a little nervous and they tighten up, I would have them do take a deep breath as their trigger to go from one to the other to try to get rid of some of that adrenaline in their bodies. We'll tie that into eye patterns, then we'll do stroke rhythms. We use music instead of metronome to develop rhythm techniques even for the practice strokes and the final strokes. So we want to kind of develop it. Now, you know, I have kids as young as 5 years old that come in here, and I don't let the parents help. The parents can sit quietly in the room, or they can go in my other room, right? And some of these kids, I have 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids, they're all different ages. And some of them have zero attention span, okay? But when I put on the music and we start using the rhythm of the music that we play, and I'll play different tempos, I'll get those same kids doing drills for 20, 30 minutes at a time. Now, if you if you've ever been around a really hyper little kid, that's a big accomplishment. And we do that routinely. So, I mean, a lot of it is simply a matter of being a little creative and helping our students. And I do the same thing with adults. I have one adult student who, for some reason, she didn't like the music. She likes the metronome, and she taped it, and she has that on her belt and with earphones, and that's what she listens to when she practices.
Yeah, that's great to hear, actually, that there's other instructors using rhythm techniques. I've been a huge proponent of that. I actually have this device that you can put on your arm that you can control the vibration. So you can actually feel the vibration and hear it as well. The do 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 do.
Yeah, I mean, all those are great tools to help the students really, you know, learn these skills.
Anything to help train the brain, right? I mean, you've covered a lot already. What would you say is, if you had to pick like one way to practice for someone, like what's the best way to practice for someone that wants to improve?
So the best way, first of all, I would say no more than 30 minutes at a time for focused practice. I mean, it's a big misconception. I loved it when I had, and I've been teaching that for years, and I was laughing because 2 years ago, I had Efren Reyes here. And I set up a small group with 10 players, and I didn't want to do it just, you know, these challenge matches. So I did some instruction had Efren do some instruction, and I had him a question and answer period. And these students, you know, one of the you know, and they all said, you know, I'm a 7, I'm this and that, and they all no sense of where they are in the order of things. But one of them asked Efren, how much do you practice? The expectation was that they'd be practicing 10, 15 hours a day. Efren said, no more than 30 minutes. If I get up early and I practice 30 minutes in the morning, maybe I will practice 30 minutes at night, but no more than 30 minutes at a time. And, you know, it was a great point of discussion because what he knew and what a lot of strong players know is that when you know, that what do they call it? The ham method, hit a million balls. It's terrible. That's the worst thing you could do, because all you're doing is, as soon as you get tired, as soon as you get frustrated, you go right back to your old habits, and you're not developing new habits. You're not learning anything new. You're not really practicing. you're playing. And so for practice, I would say short bursts of, I propose 20 to 30 minutes at a time of very focused, exaggerated repetition. And that will help you over a period of 4, 5, 6 weeks develop a new habit. And that's really should be the purpose of practice.
That's really interesting, because when you have a sharp knife, all you need to do is hone it. When you don't have a sharp knife, you have to use a stone. And I think going out and doing 30 minutes, early and then 30 minutes late, I'm wondering, how does that kind of commitment groove in good fundamentals?
Well, I think it's simply a matter of developing the skill set that makes up those fundamentals one at a time, and I tell my students, I said, look, your stroke is a very complex act, but it's made up of very simple little movements.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you focus on the simple movements, the stroke will take care of itself. It's like putting in little pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, right? If you can fit the small pieces in, at some point you're going to see a beautiful big picture on this. But you can't try to do it all at once, and that's what a lot of players make the mistake. They will try to practice everything at once. So think of playing with their friends and think that that's practice, when they're just, again, reinforcing. Now, you can get pretty good at doing something badly, right? So if you do something badly long enough, you can get okay at it, but that only goes up to a certain point. And that's not really the way to teach somebody.
That's well stated.
Yeah, if you have a bad habit, it just takes a lot longer for that to groove in, for sure.
Yeah, there's a great book called The Talent Code by a guy named Dan Coyle. And the book goes into how people learn, but also he went around the world and he visited programs, whether it's basketball, soccer, all different kinds of sports, tennis. And he looked at what he called hotbeds of success. So he would go to a tennis camp or maybe a soccer camp in Brazil, and he looked at where all these top champions were coming out of, and he did a comparison of all the coaches. What elements do they have in common? And he called them coach whisperers, okay? Because it was simply, and it didn't have anything to do with the amount of money. So some of these poorer communities were putting out great players with very simple, few resources, but it had to do with the coach's ability to tap in to, at certain points, the levels and build up those skills of the players. And he focused a lot on junior players. So it was a fascinating book. And he also talked about how the brain develops connections. And it's true. He said, old players don't get rid of old habits. They don't go away, right? Those connections are hardwired in the brain. What they have to do is they have to create new connections. And they have to exaggerate and repeat to a point where those override the old connections. The old connections never go away. So they have to override it. So that's why I said at a lot of points it's easier to teach kids. They haven't built those years of bad habits yet. The adults, we have to practice a lot more. We have to exaggerate a lot more. We have to focus a lot more because we have to override those years of bad habits that they have. But I'd recommend that. It's a good book.
Yeah, I've read The Talent Code. He talks about the myelination, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great book. I would actually highly recommend it to any instructors that are listening. Excellent book. I like an analogy I use for building habits is like a river flowing. So the water naturally wants to go down some path that's already somewhat grooved in. And the more water that flows down that path, the more it gets grooved in. And so the question is, okay, do you want it to go a slightly different direction, right? Or straighter for a swing? And so do you kind of adjust with what you have? Or do you just like, okay, we're building a new river over here. Like, let's just start a new one. And then the hard part is like feeling the difference is what I call it between the two. But it's just fascinating how the brain works and controls the body.
Yeah, but as an instructor, you really have to have at least a basic understanding of how our students learn. Otherwise, we're just floundering around with them. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it really comes back to like a cause and effect. You know, there's so many effects that we have on the pool table because we can learn physics and all this, you know, strategy and all this, but really what's the cause of all that? The cause is us. The cause is like our habits, how we see the table, how we're able to execute, and then ultimately how we're able to train to do that.
Yeah, I think if you don't think muscle memory is a big deal, compare, you know, like what you're saying of trying to teach a 60-year-old something versus somebody that hasn't done it for 2 decades or so.
All right, let's get into some rapid fire.
okay.
Play the sloppiest pool of your life and win, or play the most precise of your life and lose?
I would rather play the best pool of my life and lose. I think I would um, get much more satisfaction out of that, and I would learn just as much as I would learn just as much as if I had won, probably more. But I would definitely rather play well and lose. And if you know, and I'll go back to one of my that 8-year-old that I talked to you about early on. When he was about 10 or 11, I think he was a 7 in the APA. A lot of my kids, you know, they think these, I mean, I don't do APA anymore, but at the time that was what they were using. And I remember he said, "Roy, what are you going to do when I can beat you all the time?" I said, "When you can beat me all the time, first of all," I said, "you probably can beat me all the time. You just don't know it yet. And when you know it, you will. And second, it's going to be the best day of my life in the pool hall. Those are my best days when you as a student surpass me. And I would be disappointed if you can't, right? If I can't teach you to reach your potential and your potentials are all better than mine, then I'm doing something wrong. So I would rather play well, lose, and congratulate the person who beat me."
Yeah, their success is your success as well.
That's very true.
Do you prefer to practice alone or to spar with someone?
I prefer to practice because I think that is practice, to practice alone. If I'm going to play with somebody, I'm not really practicing. You know, I was playing some one pocket last night. I see your smile every time I mention one pocket, a straight pool.
That's right.
You must be the same generation as me. But, you know, that's not practice, right? That was sparring, and it was a lot of fun. And I was actually teaching a very good player how to play one pocket. It was a younger guy who didn't know how to play, but he was a very strong player. So 2-3 hours last night, I was showing him one pocket. Now, to me, that's sparring. It's fun, but that was not practice.
If you had to pick one drill that's your favorite, what would that be?
So if you ask my students, okay, because I'm a believer that you could take one drill and teach 50 techniques, okay, and something very simple. I like to keep the drills simple because reduce the variable. Right. I'm not interested in having students just, you know, they say, "Oh, Mr. Pastor, we finished this drill. I finished this drill. I got all the balls in." I said, "Well, I don't care." Right? Because you were working on, I might have a room full of people doing the same drill, all working on different techniques. One person might be working on the shot of ball approach. The other person might be working on an open bridge. The other one might be focusing on developing good grip technique. And we're all doing the same drill. So, or stop shot or follow. And they're still all doing the same drill. And for that drill, I kind of like the simple 15 across drill. Just something very simple. Have it across, have a ball in hand. I'll make it progressive. So we start at 1 diamond, go to 2 diamonds, go to 3 diamonds, you know, create stop shots, follow, draw. And again, I might have a whole room full of people doing that same drill, and it's a very versatile drill. But they might all be doing something different, and they all be practicing a different technique or movement using the same drill. And you could do the same thing with lots of drills. So it's really, but that would probably be, if I had to pick one, I would say that would be the one.
Roy, do you teach mostly on 7-foot bar box or 9-foot, or is there
No,
any
I
sort
have
of techniques that
so
you?
right here. I teach on everything, but right here behind me, these are 9-foot Brunswicks.
Nice.
To my left, I have two oversized 8 diamonds. I have two oversized 8 valleys, and I have a 7-foot diamond in a side room. So I have 7, 8, and 9-foot tables, and I teach on. I just taught a class in a room that had all 9-foot diamonds. It really doesn't matter too much when I teach bank and kick systems. When we teach students how to calibrate a system, it's actually helpful on these having different size tables, because we'll use the same systems, but we'll learn how to calibrate it for a 7 or 8 or a 9-foot table.
That's
All
nice.
my tables I've had redone, even the valleys, so they all have diamond cushions and 4.5-inch pockets. So just to keep some uniformity.
What excites you about the future of the sport?
I think what excites me, it makes me a little nervous too, is all this technology. I think the world has gotten much smaller. So 20 years ago, I never would have thought of working with a kid in China. I have a student now in China that we did in the break and run program. I've had kids, we help foster programs all around the world. So we help Heilig in South Africa. There's 15,000 kids in that program working the same curriculum that we're using. So we help them get that started. And never would have thought that would be possible, when I was younger. Nowadays, now we have a lot of possibilities, right? We have a lot more tools at our disposal. The world is smaller, and I think that's a good thing for us, especially in this sport.
And we're obviously all about growing the sport. So if there's one thing you could recommend to anybody watching to help grow the sport, what would that be?
The people who are watching, hopefully they're playing on some level, whether they're playing in their basement with their families or their kids, or they're watching it on YouTube, or I think it's simply a matter of, at some level, participation. It's like anything else. Great players need an audience too. I mean, some people, they can participate by liking a program, or simply viewing to have increased viewership. I think there's a lot of ways. Not everybody has to go out and start a junior program or run out and become a master instructor, or not everybody has to do things the way, Jeremiah, you're doing it, or I'm doing, somebody else is doing it. I think there's a lot of different ways and different levels of support.
Before we wrap all this up with our last word, I got to ask you, with all the junior stuff, all the international stuff you've either been to or seen online, what's the craziest thing you've seen in pool?
The explosion of technology that we've had. I never would have imagined. I never would have imagined any of these kinds of things. And I said, even like you mentioned in the beginning about my daughters making fun of me for starting a YouTube channel. These things never would have occurred to me 5, 10 years ago or 15 years ago. The whole explosion of technology now with AI, I don't know where that's going to take us. And to me, that's crazy. To me, that's crazy that you can plug something in and.
Well, here in Denver, it takes us to gauge dancing on a table.
Yeah. I bet. I just did a video for my daughter's wedding 2 weeks ago, and I was my first venture in AI. I put them together as 2-year-olds, and I had them interact and they made an AI video, and I said, who knew?
Yeah, it's wild how things are progressing. It's still not very good at really anything with pool, though. It doesn't really have a sense of the physical.
Yeah, I don't know. In a way, it's scary to me, but I think it opens up a lot of possibilities.
Sure.
Yeah, it's going to keep getting better. So yeah, we'll just ride the wave. We're both into technology, and then so how could people find you if they wanted to subscribe to your YouTube channel or get some lessons?
Basically, if they Google my name, I'm actually shocked at all the places I am. I had a student last week. I said, "How did you find me? I don't even advertise, and I have all these students." He said, "You're famous. You're all over Reddit." And I said, "What's Reddit?" I didn't even know what Reddit was, but apparently I'm on it. But I guess if people really want to find me, they can email me at reddragonbilliards@gmail.com or rorypastor@americanpoolschool.com. Or they can Google me. Apparently, they can find me on Reddit, too.
So not Roy Pastor, man of the cloth? That's not...
No. Although I did officiate my daughter's wedding last week.
Well, there you go. That's good. This has been fantastic, man. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you guys inviting me on. Yeah, you can tell I could talk for days about this stuff.
Yeah, hopefully you come back in and answer any questions, on YouTube that people may post or whatever, too. So please don't stop being interactive with the show. I appreciate that. And so would our listeners.
All right, before we close out, for anyone listening, what's one piece of advice you would give someone to improve their pool game?
I think it's something that we've covered is just focus on the small things. Take it a step at a time and focus on the small movements. Don't try to do everything at once. Take one thing at a time and focus, develop a habit, one habit at a time until you build your stroke and you build your techniques. Don't try to just go out and buy one. You got to build it.
Yeah, that's good. That's real good.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Rory.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, listeners, viewers, please, like this and subscribe it because this has been fantastic.
All right. Been a lot of fun. Take care, guys.
Yeah, make sure to leave a comment or questions. Keep practicing and may all your shots be on target.
Sounds like good advice. Take care.